Are there plans to remove lethality items from Bruisers as their main item pass? I mean, it's okay if Bruisers build lethality sometimes. If it's the only viable thing on them and it's the #1 thing they're building, that's maybe a problem. Like, I think maybe AATROX is like this right now. He's a lethality man. Looks like AATROX is a lethality man. I think this is an indication, by the way, of two things. It's an indication that Bruisers are missing some sort of ability to pen. I think one of the things that was lost for a lot of Bruisers is Cyrilda's. Cyrilda's being a lethality item right now. It's like, you know, some builders build Black Bruiser and it works on them, but there's a number of Bruisers, like say Riven as an example, who really needed Cyrilda's to function. So there's like probably a missing spot for AD Bruiser in the item system in terms of pen. Another thing is, like, if a character like AATROX is building lethality, it probably means that building tanky doesn't like get him results, which I think might not be a problem with the item system. It might be more of a problem with how we've like tuned and adjusted AATROX over the years. As an example, I highly expect that AATROX's healing isn't good enough right now. You might be like, what are you talking about, August? He hits me with a lethality Q and full heals. Yeah, but if it hits you with a Bruiser Q, it doesn't do nearly as much as it needs to let him survive a fight, which makes building Bruiser viable. This is why, like, when we changed Briar to build more Bruiser, we buffed all her healing. And so we did the same thing with Red Cane. They need that survivability if they're going to build Bruiser. Otherwise, they're just going to try to one-shot you. And so to me, Bruiser on AATROX, if he's building lethality every game, it probably means there is a deficit on his kit somewhere in like an ability to survive in a fight and be effective without one-shotting people. That would be my guess with AATROX. So he might need some follow-up to like make him function. And that follow-up probably involves things like increased healing, increased tankiness, improved cooldowns, things like that, to make it so if you don't one-shot someone, you're still a champion. Often when we see Bruisers swap to lethality, it's because they aren't effective without one-shotting people. And the way to get them back is to make sure that even if they don't one-shot you, they're still effective, which usually means healing, defense, cooldowns, things like that. Oh, someone like followed up. Would you phrase Bruiser lethality like Bruisers are building lethality because the game is balanced around allowing them to kill AD carries and mages, not survive them? No, I would phrase it like this. Bruisers are building lethality because living in a fight is not viable. And so if it's impossible for a Bruiser to survive a fight, the only viable thing they can do is instantly kill someone. And so when we see Bruisers move to lethality, it's not generally because, oh man, I can really exploit this AD carry. It's actually because they have lost versatility in their fight patterns. They can't cast enough spells. They can't heal enough. They can't survive long enough. And so when you see a Bruiser build lethality, it's because it's not viable to live in a fight, so all they can do is one-shot you. It's a little counterintuitive. But it comes from this. I'll say this. In a world where Vi can one-shot you, or do 3/4 of your health and then cast your spells 5 more times, it's actually usually a lot more viable for Vi to do the second one, the Bruiser thing. Do 3/4 of your health and cast your spells 5 more times. Because that strategy, the one where she casts lots more spells and lives a lot longer, is more versatile and safer and less binary. And so that strategy tends to be better, even if she has a different strategy, which is build lethality and one-shot you. And so when we see metas where Vi or AATROX or Kayn only build lethality, it usually means that building Bruiser won't give them the survivability they need to be a functional champion. And that survivability isn't about, oh, and then I one-shot you as a Bruiser. It's about, if I don't one-shot you, I'm still good. And if the answer is, I don't one-shot you and I suck, then you should just build lethality. Whereas if the answer is, I don't one-shot you and I'm good, then you shouldn't build lethality. You should build Bruiser because Bruiser will be more versatile and more useful. And so generally, sorry, I keep saying it, but when we see Bruisers building lethality, it often means that they do not have the defensive versatility to exist in a fight. And so they are forced to one-shot you because it's the only thing they can do. That is generally what's going on. Bruiser Briar is so boring compared to lethality. Well, I've got good news to you. You can play both. Briar is viable with both builds, which is the intent. When we made the changes, the intent was not to delete lethality. The intent was to bring them closer together, which is generally the case now. If you're a Briar main, Bruiser's good, but lethality is also good. So build what you believe in, my friend, based on the game. They shouldn't one-shot you if you aren't an assassin. Yes, they should. So here's something challenging about League of Legends, okay? AD carries do not build defense. Ever. Just never. Never any defense. It is generally impossible to cause a character who builds damage to not one-shot an AD carry once they have enough damage. I mean, there's some exceptions to that. Like, you know, Yuumi is probably not good at that. But if you manage to get 6 crit items on Yuumi, she could probably one-shot an AD carry. Like, that could work, right? And so at the end of the day, when we're balancing burst, it's usually not about your character's raw ability when in melee range to burst an AD carry. Because generally how it works is that if your character built any damage, be it crit, be it EP, build it whatever, if they find an AD carry in melee range, they probably just kill them. And so instead, the balance point is how effective are they against non-AD carries, like say tanks or whatever. Lethality characters are pretty bad against tanks. And then also, what is their target access? So as an example, for a lot of Bruisers, let's say Vi builds lethality and runs up to you and one-shots you, right? You might be like, well, that's BS. Why is she allowed to do that? It's because Vi one-shotting you in melee range with lethality is a very non-versatile pattern. It means if she fails to one-shot you, she dies. It means if she misses her Q, she dies. It means if your teammates are there and stop her, she dies. Vi one-shotting you is a very non-versatile pattern. And so there's been a number of metas where Vi lethality is bad even if it one-shots you, right? So it's kind of a thing where it's like when you say like, hey, this character built lethality and they one-shot me, that shouldn't be allowed. I'd be like, well, that is quite literally what lethality does. And so the question isn't really how do you stop them from one-shotting with lethality, although you can adjust that somewhat. This is why we changed AATROX passive to magic, why we changed Briar's R and Q to magic damage. We can like lower that one-shot ability if we need to. But it's also a question of like, what is their target access? How easy is it for them to get to you? Things like that. How versatile are they when they go in there? Like one of the nerfs we did to Briar to make lethality worse is we nerfed her E. And the reason we nerfed her E damage reduction is because lethality Briar was more tanky and more versatile than she needed to be, given the fact that she was building lethality. But at the end of the day, if a melee champion who has even a reasonable amount of auto attacks builds a bunch of lethality, there's definitely going to be situations where they one-shot AD carries. And that's just how it works. And so it's more about like, what are the other situations they run into in the game versus tanks, versus Bruisers, versus CC, all this different stuff. Like sometimes when YASUO one-shots an AD carry, they're like, that doesn't make any sense. He's not an assassin. And it's like, bro literally built Infinity Edge. What do you think is going to happen if he attacks you 3 times? P.S. If you attack him 3 times, assuming there's no wind wall, like similar things happen, right? It's just like when you're a squishy character and all you build is crit, it generally is going to cause other characters who build damage to kill you. That's how it goes. And so you can't balance YASUO to not one-shot AD carries. You instead balance YASUO to not one-shot tanks as much and make sure that he has the right target access profile such that it's hard for him to get onto an AD carry. Balancing Yasuo's AD carry damage isn't about preventing him from instantly killing an AD carry. It's about preventing him from easily getting to the point where he will instantly kill an AD carry. Is basically the idea there. Why can't Viego have sustain? He does. And he might have more in the future. Who knows? There's an amount of sustain on Viego that would be unreasonable though, because he's manaless. And so there's some amount of sustain on Viego where it just gets kind of silly in lane. And so that's the thing we have to be careful about when tuning his sustain.